working on it for a few years actually. And then what we want to do is introduce some of the tools that we've been using, and then crowdsource your perspective, your ideas as we go through that, and actually end towards ideation for solutions. These may be new solutions, or possibly, we know that we have a lot of people coming from different parts of the world. Thank you today, thanks to technology. So we definitely want to learn from you as well. But we will have this kind of process to guide us. So very, very quick introduction to Circular Design Lab. Really, it's 100% volunteer driven. You can go to the next slide, Prewa. We had some pretty big questions about what we wanted to do when we put this project together. I think some of you on the call are already familiar because you're part of the Circular Design Lab. But if it's your first time joining, what we really wanted to understand is how can we have a community-based group working on systems-oriented or level challenges. So that's some of the questions around inclusivity. How do we put it together? These are the kinds of things that we've been chewing on as we've gone forward. As for the backgrounds, quick backstory, if you can go to the next 3 slides, Prewa. We really wanted to, number one, create community. Secondly, you can move to the next slide, thanks. We're going to keep this intro pretty short. Work on capacity building around future possibilities. And then thirdly, we want to do things. We want to make it real. So it's really about making change. It's not waxing philosophic in academia or only testing on the ground. We want to marry all of those things together. So over to our team to share a little bit around the context specific to this issue.
Hi, so my name is Rina, and I'm here. I want to talk about air pollution from a global and a regional and the perspective for Thailand as well. Next slide, please. Okay, very briefly, air pollution is actually one of the biggest risks to planetary health, and it impacts health. About 6 to 9 million people are impacted by air pollution. It leads to premature death. It also affects our food supply. So it's estimated about 6 to 12% of global yield is lost due to the impact of air pollution. It impacts water, it impacts climate, obviously. It impacts climate change. And then air pollution, particularly sulfur and nitrogen emissions and ground level ozone, also impacts biodiversity as well. Next slide, please. This is the graph that actually really woke me up. It's from the Lancet report. And basically, it shows the global estimated deaths. And in here, you see that actually air pollution is the #1 global killer. Almost 9 million people die from pollution. And of that, 70% of that comes from air pollution. The second cause of death in the world is actually tobacco. The third, which you hear a lot about, it's AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. And if you look at the furthest right, you're talking about war and murder. And you can see that the numbers are actually far off, right? So that's a real wake-up call, I think, in terms of what's killing us all globally. And it's actually the one of the key igniting reports that have caused WHO to actually rank air pollution as a global cause of death, right? And has taken this issue really seriously. Next slide, please. Air pollution affects every cell in the body. That makes sense, right? We breathe in and out. It goes through our entire body. There was a study that was done, a huge global study about how it affects our body. So a lot of people think it affects the respiratory system, which it does. It leads to devastating things such as lung cancer, but it also affects things like brain cancer as well, because it goes up to it affects the brain as well. And it also leads to a lot of cardiovascular disorders. It links to miscarriages, mental health issues, things like bipolar, depression, Parkinson's disease, children's health development. In short, there's really nothing that isn't caused by air pollution initially. There's a huge amount of human ailments linked to air pollution. Sorry, next slide, please. Air pollution regionally. So at a global scale, if you look at there's about almost 9 million people globally that are affected by air pollution, of which 6.5 million people who are dying from air pollution are in Asia, right? And there's a report that was done about of all the 192 plus countries in the world, which is the worst polluting country. And Thailand ranks as the 7th, okay? The average years of life being cut short in Thailand is about 2.1 years. Next slide, please. There's variation based in Thailand based on where you live. And obviously, as we know, the worst parts of Thailand is actually in the northern part of the country. If you live in Chiang Rai, you're dying earlier by almost 4 years. If you're in Chiang Mai, it's 3.6 years. Udon Thani, which is in the northeastern part of Thailand, is about 2.8 years. And Bangkok is about 2.4 years. On average, about 2.1 years. A lot of people think air pollution is a seasonal thing. But if the next slide will show to you that no, it's actually an annual event. It happens throughout the year. So right now we're in June, July. So we'll soon be getting air pollution into the southern part of the country, coming from a lot of the burning happening in Indonesia. Then towards the end of the year, it's going to start affecting the central part of the country as well as the north and the northeast. Next slide, please. Now, why is air pollution in Thailand so bad? One of the reasons is every country has the prerogative to choose the air quality standards that they want to set. The levels that are guidelines which the WHO recommends as levels that beyond which would be detrimental to health. So these are levels set for PM2.5 specifically. The WHO set levels for 24 hours is 25 micrograms per cubic meter. And for an annually, it's 10 micrograms per cubic meter. Thailand opts to use 50 micrograms per cubic meter on a 24-hour basis and 25 on an annual basis. So on the basis of that, just on the basis of that, of setting levels much higher, that is why Thais are unfortunately dying much earlier. Next slide, please. This shows the official data currently for the Bangkok region specifically. The reason I'm showing Bangkok is because data in Bangkok is a bit mixed and a bit unclean. And this is the official data on the sources of air pollution. And as you can see, the major sources, they claim that 34% is coming from biomass, 23% is coming from traffic. And then if you look at industry, they're saying currently it's about 7.4% is coming from industry. And the next slide would beg a few questions really. And that is that in Thailand, there's about 140,000 factories in Thailand. Sorry, the figures here have been updated, it hasn't shown here. Of which about almost 80,000 of those factories are large factories that emit PM2.5. Of those, about 46,000 are located around the Bangkok metropolitan region. So it begs the question, how can it be that only 7.4% of the sourcing comes from industry, right? So I think a lot of the data is still needs to be questioned and revisited. And we've also done analysis on the social cost of air pollution in Thailand using the subjective well-being analysis. And on the basis of this, how much does PM2.5 impact the economy of Thailand? And it cost Thailand 1.7 trillion baht, which is equivalent to about 10.13% of GDP. So it's not a small number at all. Yeah. And so I hand this back now to Ajahn Parawal.
Over to you, Courtney.
Great, thank you. So we're just trying to be very mindful of time and give you the snapshots of context and then some of the process piece too. So maybe in the chat box, you could let me know, have you already ever explored or engaged with systemic design before? You can just say yes or no in the chat box. So the question is, if it's your first time, you could say, yep, first time. Or if you've already tried it out before, you can let us know. So first time, thanks. Huron Woods, great. All right, Volgan, fantastic. Okay, great. So I think some of you might be familiar, but let me put it this way. So we'll go to the next slide. And one of the things that we can often see is this kind of analogy around the elephant, right? So we may be looking at things with a variety of perspectives, but honestly, if you, just as the image is kind of communicating to us, we're only interacting with one part of actually a much larger and wider complex system. So when we think about systems and systemic design, we'll look at this image here. You can add a few more of the details. I think there was extras. Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Feiwa. It's really a blend of systems thinking. So looking at the whole elephant and all parts of what's happening, going back to that previous image, and then looking also at a proactive design process to help us actually identify some of the leverage points for change. So we want to be strategic about the actions we take collectively, but before deciding what actions to take, we want to be thinking analytically, and we're using a framework of systemic design to do so. So on the right-hand side, you can kind of see visually, and we're borrowing this from an existing toolkit around systems and design, but we want to be framing what it is that we're exploring. So just already we're framing what we're exploring. There's so many systems, but the one we're exploring is around air quality. And we're using the case of Thailand in this exact scenario. Now, with the design thinking piece, we need to actually also understand what's actually happening. And so there's this listening component that we'll talk and learn a lot more about, especially through Ajahn Prewa. But this guides us to better understand what's happening. And that's through both qualitative and quantitative. So it's data. So we just heard Kunwina sharing a lot of the statistics that exist. But we also need to understand perceptions and human behavior as well. So one of the activities that we designed in just a moment will be literally about what is beneath the surface. But another element is also about what is it that we want to create. So what is the future that we want to generate? Many of our workshops, we talk about a futures perspective, so to speak, around clean air quality. And then we will close today's workshop as well as about exploring the possibilities that exist in certain specific strategic interventions. So there's multiple ways of thinking about it. There's no one specific way, but we're just sharing one of the pathways that we've taken in our own experience as we've gone through the journey of using systemic design workshops, both online and offline since 2019, to start moving towards big picture policy change too. Yep, you can go to the next one too, thanks. So just a quick overview, very much as I was already mentioning, it's a holistic approach, and we want to be able to zoom in to small pieces of a system, but also zoom out and see the larger context at play. And just wanted to have you think, what systems are you a part of right now? Often we just live our life and we're not really analyzing all of the different types of ways in which we're interacting with systems. But with COVID, for sure, we've had to revisit the fragility of certain types of things that almost feel very near and dear and about to collapse. Maybe you think about infrastructure, healthcare, even travel, transport, food systems. There's so many different pieces of it. But in the next few slides, I'm just going to share one visual way to think of it as an individual, right? So most people on this call will have had the experience of literally trying to determine what kind of way they'll make money and exist in the world, right? We have to pay the bills, if you will. So there's a lot of different ways we can get to a job, for example. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now on that journey, right? So we're using a very simple desired future state, employment. There's so many different components at play. And so when I just asked a few minutes ago, what systems are you a part of? There's actually, as I mentioned, so many different dimensions to what kind of factors are at play when you're thinking about, or if it's for yourself, or maybe it's for friends or others in your community, how might they also gain employment, for example. So you see in this, this image, lots of different examples, criminal record or language, maybe barriers or advantage, different circumstances, things of that nature. Next slide. In this is borrowed as well from the Australian Institute for Social Innovation. And so they've actually been working on systems thinking and systems design from making it easier for certain often marginalized segments of society to better gain employment. But on that journey, there's a lot of different systems. So I just put this here as a visual, as an example of the kinds of things that we would be examining when we are talking about any kind of issue, environmental issues, social justice issues. And we're using this as just as a guiding example. So next slide. Just back to the fact that this is not a linear approach. There's a lot of zooming in, zooming out, and when we gain more information in in research, for example, in one space, it can trigger and impact the ways that we might respond to an issue. Okay, next slide. So Kin is going to share with us one of the tools and frameworks that Circular Design Lab has been testing and using in a lot of different places, but today we'll use it together as well. Over to you, Kin.
Thank you, Courtney. So let me see here. Well, thank you for the introduction, Courtney. Let me just quickly give a shout out to all the Thais audience out there as well. In Thai first จะสำหรับวันนี้นะเรามี co-facilitators เป็นคนไทยด้วยนะครับเพราะฉะนั้นถ้าตามไม่ทันหรือยังไงเนี่ยไม่ต้องกังวลเพราะว่าเดี๋ยวตอนที่เราเข้าไปอยู่ในกลุ่มทำกิจกรรมกลุ่มย่อยแล้วเนี่ยทุกกลุ่มย่อยจะมีทีมสนับสนุนจะมี facilitator ที่เป็นคนไทยเนี่ยร่วมอยู่ด้วยนะครับแล้วจะคอยช่วยได้เพราะถ้าพลาดอะไรไปไม่ต้องกังวลนะครับเดี๋ยวจะมีผู้ช่วยอธิบายให้ในกลุ่มย่อยอยู่แล้วนะครับแล้วก็ผมในช่วงที่ผ่านมาตอนที่คุณโค้ชนี่พยายามอธิบายถึงเรื่อง system design basics เนี่ยผมพยายามแปลสรุปบางอย่างลงไปให้ใน chat box นะครับเป็นพื้นฐานให้นะครับแต่คิดว่าส่วนใหญ่ที่เข้ามาในวันนี้ไม่น่าจะคงจะไม่มีปัญหาเรื่องภาษากันเท่าไหร่นะครับ Okay so that was a little welcome to all the Thai participants there. Now I'm going to switch back to the English. The first thing that, as Courtney has mentioned, one of the first steps in a systemic design process is to understand the problem, and that's what we are actually going to do in a first breakout group, in which we will be asking what are the causes of air pollution problems in Thailand and Southeast Asia and beyond, depending on where you're coming from. Is it just farmers burning their fields, or is it the proliferation of construction project? Is it the industrial emissions, or is that vehicular traffic emissions, right? So we'll get to understand all of that, or we'll get to brainstorm all of that together here today. Right, next slide, please. So the tool that we'll be using to understand or to brainstorm together is called the Iceberg model. The Iceberg model is one of the models that are commonly used in the systemic design process, where it's essentially you're trying to look at problems beyond what you see on the surface, right? So what you see on the surface, which is shown on the top level of the iceberg, is the events level. So for air pollution could be things like you look outside your window and you see a smoggy kind of sky. That's the events. You turn on your air quality monitor system and you see that the AQI is through the roof. That's the events, right? But we want to challenge you to think a little bit deeper as you think about the sources of air pollution today, and to think about what constitutes the events that you see. Why do you see a smoggy sky? Why do you see high AQI? The first layer down would be the patterns. Have you been seeing this all year long, or is it certain seasons of the year? Kumina had mentioned a little bit about the year-round festival or festivities of air pollution in Thailand. That's one way of looking at it as a pattern, right? Diving deeper would be asking questions. Well, what causes that pattern? Why do we see, why do we see a high AQI in Chiang Mai every single year in December and January? Why do we see smoggy sky in Bangkok every January and February? What systems are in place? What kinds of enablers is there that causes that, right? And of course, and then think even deeper, ask even deeper. So what a system is built by people, right? So asking yourself, what mental models are we in our society, or are we in here that enables such system to be put in place, right? So if you're talking about an air pollution legislation being not there, right? If you don't have a legislation, that's a systemic structure. What causes that? Why is there no push for air pollution legislations? Is there some kind of a mental blockage against it? Is it, are people not caring about health as much as economy, right? Are people not knowing that there's health problem? That kind of mental blocks could be also the cause, part of the problems, part of the sources that cause air pollution, right? So I would challenge everybody when we get into the breakout group here to think deeply, right? Start from the event, start from what you see. If you're seeing burning, if you're seeing AQI, that's your events. Ask yourself a few more times, what causes that? Why are we seeing the burning? Why are we seeing the burning repeatedly? What systems what structures are in place that enables that, and what mental models of people involved are causing that kind of problems, okay? So Courtney, I don't know if you're prepared. Okay, so Courtney is now preparing to break everyone into the breakout group. And like I said, we will be doing, I think, 4 groups today. So you'll be in a small group in a breakout room, and we'll spend about 15, 20 minutes here to brainstorm. Once again, what are the causes of air pollution in Thailand? And think systematically, think deeply, trying to cover all the layers. we'll be using a tool called Miro board, which is a collaborative platform where you can write on a piece of Post-it notes and then put them at the various different layers on the iceberg. The co-facilitators in each group will help you out with the Miro board, so don't worry about trying to learn the board unless you are already familiar with it. Then feel free to play with it. But if not, don't worry. Focus on talking and focus on thinking about the source of air pollution. So over to you, Courtney, to help break people into the breakout room, please.
Great, thank you. And just to add on, as Ken mentioned, you have actually 2 to 3 support facilitators. And our first few minutes is actually just a round of introductions. So before we dive into the iceberg, what we'll do is we'll share the Miro link. If you like Miro and you wanted to dive in and join by adding notes, no problem. We'll have that link in the chat box for you. But if you prefer to just use the chat box, not worry about Miro, the facilitators will share the screen. And just to say, the first few minutes will be dedicated to making sure we all know who is in the room. We have 4 breakout rooms, so 4 groups, and each room at this point has almost 9 to 10 people. So I'll start that now. We have, in 20 minutes, we'll come back to the plenary, but just the facilitators will keep track of time. So don't worry about that, just enjoy. Thanks so much, and I'll open the rooms just now. You can click on join the room, or it will automatically assign you.
There's Courtney.
Hi.
Wonderful. So a great group of 7. I think we're all here. Is that right, Courtney?
For now, go ahead. Yep, we can get started on the intros. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so let's do a quick round of introductions just to warm up the room and hear where everyone is dialing in from. So if you could maybe just pop it in the chat, we'll get this going. But if you could share your name, the city that you currently live in, and the organization that you're from, or maybe the project that you're representing, whatever that might be. So just those 3 things in the chat would be great. And let me share my screen so you can see what we're going to be mapping. I'll scribe as well what you add into the chat. Thank you, Akash, for kicking us off. So your name, your city, and which organization or project program that you're coming from. Just share my screen. Voila. Thank you, Sander. Everyone can see. Okay, and if you haven't put your introduction in the chat already, just your name, the city that you're currently in, and your organization that you represent.
All right. Hey, Steph, do you mind sharing the screen so we can see the questions that were there next to the map?
Let me.
Yeah.
Can you see that now?
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Great.
So yeah, we can, I think, move on to people can unmute and do a self-introduction. And if you can keep your camera on, fantastic. No worries if not.
Great. So maybe let's start with Akash. I'm going to pick you because you were the first to introduce yourself in the chat. If you want to say a quick hello and share a little bit about your name, which city you're dialing in from, and your organization.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Akash Bhalerao. I'm based in Pune, India. So just on the other side of the Bay of Bengal. I am working with Ashoka's Globalizer program, which is a systems change accelerator for social entrepreneurs. And I'm a tree hugger. That's what really draws me into this kind of work. And also growing up in India, air pollution is an issue you grow up with. So also care about exploring how to address it.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us here. Cool. And next up, let's see, Sander, can I pick on you to make a quick introduction?
Sure. love getting picked on. My name's Sander, yeah, and I'm currently in Phuket. Sorry, I can't put on the video. It's not quite the right background here. Yeah, working from here now, a little bit in Bangkok for my own organization, Muscle Consultants Capital. We work with different stakeholders in Myanmar and Thailand on applying systems thinking mindsets.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us.
Sure.
And let's see, I'm gonna jump over to Hirunwood. Welcome. Would you like to share an intro?
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Can you hear me? Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Hirunwood. I'm from Bangkok, Thailand. I am now working for Ministry of Public Health on the project of the effect of air pollution on health. Okay, nice to meet you all.
Very fitting topic. Thank you for joining us. Very, very interested to hear your perspectives on this as well. And moving across to Chorne.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
My name is Shani. I am currently a student in SIIT. I'm working with plastic design called plastic. Nice to see you today.
Thanks for joining, Choni. I'm going to jump over to Chao Su. Are you here?
Yes. Sorry for not showing my face. It's a little bit classy. My name is Chao Su Ting. You can call me Chao Su. And now I'm a master's student at International Program of Hazardous Substance and Environmental Management, Chulalongkorn University.
Welcome. Sounds like we've got a lot of students and academic perspectives in this room, which is fantastic. And I think we also have Savan and Nok left. Oh, and Courtney. So maybe just quick intros from all of you also. Savan, do you want to start first?
Hello, everyone. I'm Savan from School of Global Studies at Thammasat University. So I'm now in Pathum Thani, Thailand, and I'm Cambodian from Siem Reap. So I'm now interning with Circular Design Lab. I'm really excited to meet you all. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And Nok?
Hello, hi everyone. I am Nok. Currently a PhD student on School of Public Policy in Chiang Mai University. I'm actually based in Bangkok and so happy to be with you all tonight.
You have a lovely background. Definitely brings the beach vibes back. Awesome.
All right, I think that is everyone minus myself, but I already did an intro at the very beginning. Is that right? Did we get everyone's stuff?
That is true. I think we might have another newcomer, Pasarapa Chayakul. Are you there? Would you like to share a short introduction? Not sure if you can hear us, but you can also share an introduction in the chat. It would be wonderful to hear which city you are dialing in from and which organization you're from.
Okay, so let's go ahead. For starters, we really appreciate you joining. I see a lot of interest from Bangkok, which is fantastic. But Steph, if you don't mind, just zooming down and we'll go into the iceberg exercise. As we mentioned in the introduction, not everybody has used this. So what we want to do is make sure it's really clear about how to go about it. So we have it outlined here. I'll actually go ahead and on my screen unlock it stuff because I think it's can't move things around right at this point.
Yeah, that's okay. A bit locked for me.
It's a bit locked. Okay, 1 second. While I'm moving the Miro. Okay.
Collaboration tools.
Yeah, it should be good now. Okay. So what you can see here is, as Ken mentioned in the introduction piece, what we're really trying to do is understand what we see on the surface. So we see often a lot of symptoms of the problem in regards to the air pollution. So we're going to use the frame of Thailand. And since we have most people based in Thailand, it's really great. And if you're not based in Thailand, that's totally fine. We'll just use a different color post-it note to identify if your ideas are coming from a context that's different than what we're talking about. But we wanted to give you a few minutes so to think individually about why the air pollution in this context exists, and if we could start mapping some of the challenges. So we'll give you about 2 minutes, and on your own, you can put it in the chat box, but specifically, I'm sorry, Steph, if you don't mind keeping it on you're sharing your screen. Yeah, if you could keep it on the iceberg part, just static. Yeah, okay. We'll give you 2 minutes to try to, if you can, come up with at least one idea per section, right? So what are we seeing? What are you observing? An example might be lots of school days shut down because of hazardous air pollution during the winter time, for example. That would be an observation. So what are we seeing? What other patterns are we noticing over time? An increase, for example, in sales of air purifiers, or an increase of lung cancer rates. There might be other things as well. The third stage here, and maybe Steph, if you can zoom in just a little bit so we can see the iceberg model in a lot of detail. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So what else are you noticing? This is somewhat subjective, but what is causing these patterns, right? So what are the structures in place? Is it a lack of policy? Is it a lack of education? Is it a lack of, it could be a variety of things, or maybe it's too much of something. So maybe it's not just a deficit, but it's too much sugarcane burning, for example. And then other things, this is where the intangible piece, so at the very bottom of an iceberg, what are the kind of intangible elements that exist, value systems, beliefs, mental models, and frameworks that enable this issue to happen. So when we were doing this ourselves as CDL, as our project team, one of the key things that comes up is apathy from a policy standpoint. Sometimes citizens don't necessarily feel like they have, it doesn't matter if they don't have the power to change things. So there is a belief system at play that individual citizens can't really make change happen. Those are the kinds of things that we want we're crowdsourcing from you. So I'll give let's say the first 2 minutes for you to individually add it yourself, and we can put the Miro link to the chat box. But like we said, if you're not interested in using Miro today, we're here to do it for you. So you can just type your ideas into the chat box. After 2 minutes, we're going to have a discussion and start noticing what are the kind of things that we're observing together. And maybe there's some new elements that come to play as we have that discussion. So I'll set the timer for 2 minutes. I'll actually play some music so that when the music is over, then you'll know that it's time for us to come back together. But as I get that set up, does anybody have any kind of questions that are coming up for you before we start?
And Courtney, you're popping in the link into the chat?
Yep, I'll do it just now. Yeah. But just let's make sure your screen stays still, and then I can take some notes on the back end too.
I think there's a bit of movement from others on the board, which is causing it to move around a bit, but I'll try and keep it in focus.
Okay, thanks. All right, and let me make sure that you can hear the music as well. Oh, I don't. Can you hear?
Yep, music's coming through.
Okay, great.
Great, so for those in Miro, feel free to grab a Post-it, and we're working from events, right, Courtney?
Yep, actually, if you can come up with one per each section of the iceberg, yeah.
Then we'll work our way down.
Yeah, so 4.
And if you're not comfortable using Miro, then add your 4 inputs: events, patterns, system structure, and mental models into the Zoom chat, and we'll add it for you.
All right, we're having a speedy session. But I think we can go ahead and get started. And I see that already we've got some contributions directly in the Miro and then others. So as we have the conversation, we'll put us as facilitators will also start taking the notes for you. So maybe we can go ahead and get started with, I think Sander, you mentioned something here, and I believe Akash, you're also on the Miro. So yeah, walk us through some of the things that are coming up for you and what you've observed. So over to Sander first.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm just brainstorming in the chat, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Seems a bit faster. So you mentioned the increase in purifiers. It just went with that. Also increases in other products that people wear to avoid the effects of air pollution. Face masks, air conditioners. That includes probably also things like how we're redesigning our transportation systems, vehicle design, but also public transportation systems that have to accommodate for increased pollution. I thought about discoloration or deterioration of buildings from these being exposed to these contaminants, what that does to the structure or the infrastructure over time. Also thought about extreme air weather events, quote unquote. So what pollution does for things, the occurrence of acid rain and other such anomalies, or what should be anomalies, I suppose. Yeah, that's as far as I got. Healthcare was what I was writing when you picked on me. And healthcare costs, the uptake from increases in basically all those areas that was it Weena who explained the issues that air pollution can bring physically. So an increase in cost that probably leads to an increase in an economic burden, a burden on the healthcare system, disproportionately for those aspects as opposed to other aspects. Okay, I think I'll leave it at that for now, but a lot of patterns anyway.
Wow, well, that's fantastic, and very rapid ideation already on the challenges. So Steph, do you mind just zooming in a little bit so we only see the iceberg and maybe the surrounding notes, so it's easier for those that are not necessarily directly on Miro. So we're going to be moving some of Sander's ideas over into the patterns pieces and some of the elements that he also described. But I see Akash, you're also on the board. Would you like to go ahead and share some of the things? And maybe there's something related to what Sander also mentioned, but maybe not. So over to you, Akash.
I think maybe I'll just share one point, so there's also space for others to share. I think for me, the most interesting thing I'm observing is in the mental models, a lot of young people are conscious of air pollution, and they're seeing these effects, they're seeing these reports at that age, and they're like, what can we do? And it's very interesting because 10 years ago, when young people, like we were trying to organize young people for environmental issues, like no one would be interested, but now, at least among my friend group, but now there is so much awareness, and like there is that belief that we need to have clean air. I mean, it's a human right, but at the same time, like people are also like active in that.
Hello, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if that was a chop in the internet or if you had wrapped up. Maybe I missed a piece there. Did you just end, Akash, or unlike the?
I might not have ended clearly. So maybe my main point was it is exciting to see young people demand and fight for clean air. Okay. It's sad that they have to, but
yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. I didn't know if that was like the mic drop. Okay. So we have actually only around half a minute left, but this is actually just to help us scrape the surface a little bit. And we know that we had a longer workshop, which we usually do. But would anybody else like to share in the last half minute or so before we get back to the plenary? we have some experts here from Ministry of Health.
Or if you want to share any observations.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been very curious to hear those perspectives.
All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and move back to the plenary because we're going to be building on some of these. So if you didn't get a chance to share everything, no problem. The next element of what we explore together will still take all of this into account. So, all right.
Do we have everybody back already? I think, right? Courtney, can we confirm that everybody's back out of the breakout room? It looks like.
Yes, we have most everyone back.
Okay, perfect. So I hope that was fun for everybody. Notice that that was a very quick. I understand that was a very quick kind of a sprint breakout exercise, right? To really talk about the iceberg in all of its layers. Would take a long time, and we've done this before within the Circular Design Lab and our specifically our air pollution group within the Circular Design Lab. We've done this over a long time, right? Like a couple of hours of this. So I understand that this is a short time and maybe we caught you off mid-sentence. I apologize for that. We have a limited time. We want to make sure though that you get a taste, a quick intro, a taste of what it's like to go through a systemic design process, right? So right now you've got a taste of the first part of it. To frame the system, to understand, to think about what are the constituting elements to the system. The next portion will be thinking about how do we tackle that, but we get to that a little bit. So let me just a quick observation from me, and I was bouncing around to all the 4 groups, and some of the really good insights were popped up. Some of the things I didn't even think about before. For example, somebody mentioned about building the roads and making it free to use the roads, or actually it's essentially state funding air pollution on a massive scale. That's an interesting point, right? Somebody mentioned about the equity and justice and the competition between economic growth versus the health of the people, right? So that's an interesting point. A lot of people mentioned, of course, the vehicular emissions, or a lot of traffic, a lot of cars burning gas, putting out smokes and stuff like that, biomass burning, rubbish burnings, right? My quick observation is it seems like a lot of people are coming from the city though, either Bangkok or other cities, right? There's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of rubbish burning, which are kind of a majority of the city problems, right? Some people mentioned biomass burning. I'm particular on the biomass because my hometown is in the northeast of Thailand, in Khon Kaen, and we get my parents get their lungs filled with smoke every winter, and that's pretty bad. Okay, so all right, so now I'm going to move us on to the next portion, and I'm going to invite Kunvina back on the stage once again. I don't think we mentioned who she is. She is a co-founder of Thailand Clean Air Network, by the way. So she and her team of volunteers have been working on the air pollution work for years. They're working on a major project which you talk about at the end of this session, at the end of our workshop today. But she and her team has done a lot of research on the sources of air pollution. So remember what you've brainstormed in your breakout group. Kunvina is now going to come on and say, based on the research that she and her team has done, what are the sources that they found to be the major contributor to air pollution in Thailand? Kunvina, please.
Great. Thanks, Kin. Just to follow on what Kin had said in our group, just a quick overview. There were some very interesting insights and reflections that people shared. And one of the ones, the issue was about the obedient subservient mindset that Thais actually have, which is this thinking of, ไม่เป็นไรหรอก, like, she'll be right, everything will be fine. So people don't take these issues as seriously as they should. And then also at a policy level, there was talk about how a lot of the policy level thinking is that these things are the thinking about dealing with it at a very as something that's only very seasonal, and it'll just go away, you know, like changes in the weather. So those are some of the very interesting insights that we had in our group. Now, to share with you about the systems insight that we have from the work that we've done in air pollution, let me next slide, please. So drawing from what Kin had talked about in terms of the iceberg model, this is the similar thing, the similar iceberg model, but showing to you what normally what we see as above the water surface is what is known as direct violence, right? So if someone's harmful to someone physically, you see that. If it's a verbal violence, you can actually observe that. But what we don't actually observe is what's underneath the water surface. And those are things that are, you know, structural violence and cultural violence are things that happen very succinctly that we don't really see. And the next slide will give you a kind of a graphical depiction of one type of structural violence. And one of the structural violence is sort of the inequality in the world that we see. And that manifests itself a lot in the issue of air pollution, because air pollution is linked to many different things. And one of it is, of course, who is using a lot of the energy, who is generating a lot of the production. And a lot of times when people look at air pollution as being an issue that is only a domestic only issue, but it's actually a huge global supply issue. So before, when I was showing you the map that showed the amount of air pollution within Asia, right? The thing that it should probably scream at you is if you think about where the production processes in the world are based right now, that maps quite well with where the air pollution, the worst air pollution in the world are now from, right? If you look at the top 10, top 10 cities in the world, it's pretty much here in Asia, okay? Next slide, please. So based on the research that we've done and a lot of the action research that we've done going into the fields and talking to all sorts of different stakeholders, there are pretty much 5 sources of air pollution. So the first one is biomass burning. So this is forest fires, also agricultural burning, a lot of it linked to large agro-businesses. The second source is vehicle pollution. So whether it's, here in Bangkok, it's, motor vehicle, it's your motorcycles, it's your buses, your big trucks and whatnot, but also boat pollution as well, right? If you're here in Bangkok. The third source is industrial emissions, and in here I also lump into it not just the industrial emissions coming out from factories, but also power plants and your also waste dump sites as well. That goes into this category. The fourth source of air pollution is transboundary haze coming from all our neighboring countries. And then the fifth source that people don't talk about, which is more important for big urban centers like Bangkok, is actually urbanization. So the way the city is built up a lot, that causes the air not to be able to circulate and creates the intensity and concentration of air pollution that we have here in Bangkok. Next slide, please. What we did in the second workshop that CDL held was we all kind of brainstormed together and tried to pull our collective knowledge and collective thoughts and ideas about what the sources of air pollution is. And this was the creative solution, the creative display of the various sources. And that was just to show it to you visually in one snapshot. Next slide, please. And then we tried to think through and see, what are the underpinning reasons behind air pollution. And then we actually voted amongst ourselves as well as what we think would be sort of the key leverage points that would help ignite change on this issue. And it's huge, it's multifaceted, it's complex, and it is about lack of awareness and engagement ultimately that will really, push the change that we need. And people talk that we've looked at issues about education and issues about, environment being, a party that doesn't have a voice, right? So people aren't able to, everything about that affects the environment in economics is termed as an externality, right? Nobody is actually responsible for it. And therefore all of us collectively suffer from it. Next slide, please. Yep, so I take this back now to Parwal.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Khun Veena. So we'll hear more about the movement from Thailand Clean Air Network from Veena after the the second breakout session. But for now, we're going to move from the system understanding phase to system intervention phase. So far, we have been trying to understand deeper and more holistically about the air pollution problems. And now we are about to enter a phase where we are coming up or starting to think about the potential solutions or potential intervention to the systemic problem. So we're going to be looking at what systemic tools that can help us design sustainable solutions and also brainstorm interventions to tackle the air pollution problem in Thailand. One of many systemic design tool is the leverage point framework. So as Kunvina has mentioned a little bit about the leverage point, so it is the point or the places in the system where you can effectively intervene and cause large system impact. So we have the term for the high leverage point and the low leverage point, and we want to look for the high leverage point. So the high leverage point is the place where in the system where a small amount of change force causes a large change in system behavior. So you only, maybe the money or the effort, the problem solving effort, you put them probably a little bit, but because you put it so strategically, it actually yield high impact. And in general, when we go deeper, we go past the events and we try to look for what are the underlying structures, what are the mental models that are actually, are the sources of all the, structures and all the events that are happening. The deeper we go, the higher leverage we got. Donela's 12 leverage point is one of many tools that we can actually look at the common leverage points that are effective. And we have anything ranging from numbers, parameters, buffer, stock flow structures, delays. And when we go deeper down, we have, how to improve the information flows. How do we change the rules? How do we encourage more self-organization in the system? What about changing the system's goal? Is there any goal that should be changed? Also the paradigm of thoughts. This is where everything originates, just like mental models. So is there any paradigm that, sorry, the motorcycle just struck. And the paradigm of thoughts, and actually the deeper one is transcending paradigm, is about being flexible and adapt to adjust to the changing context. For the, do I have time to go into, okay, I'm just gonna go into like a few leverage points here. We don't have so much time. So the leverage point number 6, information flow, is actually a pretty strategic point because missing feedback is one of the most common causes of system malfunction. So adding or storing information can be a powerful and cost-effective intervention. So here I'm gonna invite Kunvina to talk a little bit about the restoring the information around air quality.
Just to share, to build on what Ajahn Prawar was saying, in the case of Thailand specifically, people are only aware of PM2.5 literally only 2 years ago. And some people might be wondering, why is it sort of coming left field? And the answer is really simple. The data has been collected almost for over a decade now in Thailand. But because in their infinite wisdom, the government didn't want people to be so startled about this data. So they made the decision to not include PM2 included in it at all. Nobody even knew about it. But when things got really bad, which was about end of 2017, 2018, that's when they added it in. And because of this huge push, people started following it. People started using different applications such as Air Visual and whatnot. And so that really created a lot of awareness within Thailand. Yeah, I'll bring it back down to Ajahn Prawar.
Thank you so much, Ka. Also, I want to talk a bit about the self-organization. So self-organization is actually the strongest form of system resilience. So it's the ability to structure for the systems to structure themselves, to organize, to learn, to diversify, and to complexify. And to achieve self-organization, it actually requires freedom and experimentation and a certain amount of disorder. So this can actually threaten power structures. I want to invite Kunwina again to talk a little bit about, you know, the effort in the air pollution context to self-organize.
Yeah. On this one, let me share the case of the US actually, which has been very successful in terms of achieving awareness on air pollution, which has really galvanized and led to the Clean Air Act in the US. And that was really started in the campuses of the US. A lot of people would have known that as there's one Pacific senator who actually started off going into the campuses and talking about the impact of air pollution on people's health. And that ignited an entire movement, and that all happened at the same time when, you know, flower power and sort of the anti-war sentiment in the US in the 70s was really, really strong. So with that kind of things happening, that really galvanized a huge movement that led to the Earth Day network that we know of today, right? And that was what helped create the change in the entire clean air movement in the US. Now, I wanted to also share another quick example of another country, which is not democratic in the sense of the US and in the same form as the US, and that is China. And in the case of China, even though self-expression may not be as open as in the US, it was actually push from civil society that was really important, that pushed the Chinese government to take air pollution really seriously. And when they did, they moved very, very quickly. Okay, I'll bring it back to Ajahn Prawal now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ka. All right, so I think we're ready. So for the purpose of brainstorming, I picked top 5 leverage points here: the information flows, the rules, self-organization, goals, and paradigms, and then turn them into the guiding questions for brainstorming. So for the information flow, what are the missing flow of information? How can we improve information flows and access to information? What rules and regulations should be changed? You can think about incentives, punishments, constraints, informal social agreements. Oh, sorry, I didn't mention that. So we have this, you know, sort of the key question for brainstorming here. So it's the how might we tackle the air pollution issues in Thailand, given the various aspects of the systemic air pollution problems brought to light during the Iceberg exercise. So building on what you have uncovered during the Iceberg exercise, just come up with some of the ideas to tackle air pollution issues in Thailand. And these are the guiding questions that I crafted based on the 12 leverage points, so that you have this kind of system lens in brainstorming. So, so leverage point 4, self-organization. How can we empower actors or stakeholders to change the system by themselves? And what about the goals? So what are the goals and objectives of the systems that need to be changed? And what change in mindset or the paradigm of thoughts or worldview is needed? And how can we raise collective awareness on the topic? So we're gonna put these guiding questions on the mirror board so you can refer to when you brainstorm. And just a little bit of the brainstorm rules. So try to go for quantity for now. And we're gonna be focusing on the quality afterwards. So for now, don't hold yourself back. Just, you know, when you have anything pop up, just, you know, share the ideas, because your idea could actually trigger or inspire a better and more promising idea. So for now, go for quantity, defer judgment, and try to build on ideas of others instead of judging at this phase, and also encourage wild ideas. Kunwina, how do you want to share a little bit of the air pollution innovation so that it inspire the brainstorm as well?
Sure. So there's a couple of innovation that's out there in terms of dealing with air pollution. So one is from Gravity Labs, and this is a group of very entrepreneurial people. They're based out in India, and what they've done is figured out a way to actually capture pollution that comes out of motor vehicles. Really, literally repurposed air pollution and made it into ink. And that poster that you see in that picture is painted using what they call air ink. Okay. The second innovation comes from Thailand. So it's the world's first electric public motorcycle by a Thai startup called eTran. They've developed this, and I think at the end of this year, it's actually going to go live, and you can actually start to lease them out publicly. So those are a couple of ideas to help deal with air pollution. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So as you can see, even though we have the guiding questions, but you don't have to stick. I mean, it's just a guiding question. So try to open yourself up. So these solutions that Kunwina just shared don't really fall into the guiding questions, but it's really innovative and creative. And actually, if the first example is a good example for reframing, right? Like when you look at the pollution, we often think of the pollution as problem, but when you reframe and think of the air pollution as opportunities, then you come up with something innovative like this. So right now, we're gonna go into the second breakout sessions, and in the small breakout rooms, you will have the co-facilitator and group facilitator to give you more information about all the steps. So Courtney, are you?
Yep, I will move everyone over. And just to say, we have 15 minutes for the entire part. Okay. So we'll focus mostly on step one, and then depending on how time goes, if it makes sense to move it over into this step two, which is where we start thinking about what's feasible and what's high impact, then we can. But the key thing is that we have a really great conversation. And at the very end, we will, in closing, Kunwina will share more about where your ideas, where all of this is actually going, and already where let's say the trajectory is, because there's a lot happening on the ground, but we want to make sure that you're clear about that too, and ways you can get involved, pragmatically speaking. So I'll open the rooms now, and thanks again. See you in just a moment. Hello.
Here on part C. Hey, Courtney.
Hey, everybody.
Just started sharing screen again, focusing on this section.
Perfect. Thanks. Great. So should we, Steph, did you give some ideas on how we want to go about, do we want to take a few minutes to ourselves to come up with ideas, or do we want to just do it around the table, see what emerges and build on that conversation?
Yeah, not yet, but I'm noticing not many of us are on the Miro board, so maybe it would be good to do a round of ideation and we can capture these ideas and put it on the board.
Perfect. Great. So let's do this. Let's make this pretty interactive since time is short. And what I'd like to do is see what comes up for you now that you've already been exposed to an hour of things that include the framework around systems, points of views, as well as some of the content and case study that Weena and Prewa were sharing. So maybe we could just actually build the conversation. As mentioned, there's different things we could be looking at, right? So we could also focus on what's missing in terms of information, what kinds of rules, regulations might need to be changed, who and how could we empower other stakeholders to take more dramatic action. Maybe there's mindset shifts. So let's just literally go from the top and see if, as you're having this conversation together, what else emerges. And then, as Steph mentioned, we'll take some notes. So would anybody like to unmute and go first and share straight away any things that has come up for you, ideas? Could also just call on people. Akash, how about you? Did you just unmute almost?
Yeah.
Perfect. Almost.
I think,
go for it.
Am I allowed? Yeah. I think the point I wanted to share was about data. I think even with carbon emissions overall, there is a lot of conversation around like how individuals have responsibility about their carbon footprint. But after that one article came out about how 100 companies have caused like I think 70 or 80% of emissions on time, it was really something that set into context the scale of the problem. So similarly, if there is research and information and that's publicized and pushed out about the biggest polluters, or just people's pollution levels, I think it might help.
Great, thanks. Anybody want to add on to that, the notion around data, right? So information being more ubiquitous, more clear, more available, and how that can also shift the way in which individuals collectively come together to change even behavior, or even companies might change behavior, that kind of pressure. Chosutin or Chwani? Maybe Nak or Savant, if you have anything else you'd also like to chime in. Okay, Chosutin, I see you unmuted, go for it.
The rules for like prohibiting the forest firing or something like that, the rules and regulations should be strict, and then prohibited cutting down trees or something like that.
And can you share a little bit more about the background of your idea? Where did you get this idea, or what's it inspired by? Hey, Chosutin, I'm sorry if maybe also correct me if I'm mispronouncing your name, but I didn't hear you. I don't know if you're speaking or not. Just asking for more context.
Okay. I said that there should be strictly rules who prohibit forest fire or cutting down trees.
Okay, and can you tell me more about why this idea is important for you? What's missing?
Because nowadays in some kinds of villages, they use trees by cutting down trees especially for fire, and then for agriculture. And so that's why we have to prohibit some kinds of cutting down trees by establishing the laws.
Okay. So are you saying that these rules don't exist because or what?
No. I said that we have to, how can I say, establish strictly.
Okay, so more enforcements. So the rules exist, but making sure that they're actually enforced. Yeah, it's complicated too, because I think sometimes I know in some parts of northern Thailand, you have hill tribe communities where their livelihoods are based on building homes from the ecosystem, and it's pretty complex. So I think this is a really interesting idea for sure to explore and make sure it works for the multiple dimensions of stakeholders at play as well. Thanks so much for that. And I see a hand up from Shorny. How about you? What are you thinking?
To me, I think the inspiring or all of the issues to the kid or to the younger age or low education, from their young age, is most important because they can understand the issues and prevent the future in the problem in the future.
And do you have any examples of where this is already working well, or are you saying it's completely absent, so we need to start it from the scratch?
I don't have it, sorry.
Okay, great. But absolutely, this is something that from the Circular Design Lab, when we did this project, one of the key things that emerged was the lack of education for primary school students, and environmental education almost is completely absent, at least from a older generation. Maybe now, I'm not sure, but making that more clear, right? This kind of curriculum where you're connected to the environment, you're connected to the ecosystem. That's great, great point, thank you. Savan, would you like to share? We know that you're also supporting CDL as an intern, but you're also studying at Thammasat and from Siem Reap in Cambodia. So I'm sure there's some ideas that have come up for you. Do you have anything you'd like to offer?
For me, like before I come to Thailand, in Cambodia, like air pollution is like a real problem. So there's not like many education on that area on air pollution. And then when I come here, like I just heard about the PM2.5 and stuff, and like it, yeah, like it really like put me on like the side of like thinking more about the environmental problems that are happening, and not just inside, not just at my country, but at other countries as well. Yeah.
Right. So people, it sounds like people are aware of it from a firsthand experience. Like they know that air pollution exists, but as you mentioned, coming here and learning about it in more detail, PM2.5, what is particulate matter? And I think also another interesting point is sometimes the idea is that it's an environmental issue, but actually the point Kun Weena was mentioning is it's really a social justice and health issue, because it's one of the world's leading killers in terms of the health implications. So it's also interesting when people look at it not just as environment, but also social welfare and health challenge. Okay, cool. Nak or Steph, anything you guys want to add as well? Yeah, Nak, over to you.
Okay, yes, thank you. So I am just thinking that it's like the problem that comes and goes. So yes, for a few months we witness it firsthand, and then we forget about it, and then it comes back the next year. But I think that it's very important that the media people kind of take on this kind of issue and maybe run it continuously in order to get the attention from the mass, from the people, and for them to realize that this problem is killing them slowly, So yeah, it's and not a lot of them are aware of how harmful it is to their health.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're actually going real deep into the bottom of the iceberg, right? The mindsets, and how do you make something that sometimes feels, as you said, killing you slowly feel more urgent and important, because at the end of the day, it's still really dramatic in terms of the impact as well. How about Steph, over to you, and then we just open it up and see what other ideas emerge, or if there's one specifically that we think would be really fascinating for Circular Design Lab or other groups working on this issue to take forward, that can be part of we start looking at what's feasible and what's impactful as a part 2, so to speak, of our breakout. So Steph, over to you.
Yeah, no, the contributions so far have been great. And when you mentioned sort of like, how do we change that paradigm from something that's slowly killing us and bringing us to more awareness, it reminded me of sort of the revolution around tobacco and cigarette use, and how public health really had to take determined efforts from changing culture and behavior and the associations that people had with something, and also inviting replacements. I'm wondering if there are areas that we can learn from previous interventions where there's been a distance between your behavior and the outcome. But yeah, it's so interesting. Nok had a really good point as well, because it's cyclical. We can push it away from us when it's not in front of us and not think about it. But how do we build more accountability, not just as individuals, but even at country levels? And, I'm from Indonesia, and I'm very well aware that, a lot of the burning in Indonesia also passes on to other countries. And in those situations, like, no one feels responsible. So there's that shift that we need to look at as well, and better understand what kind of solutions can work at various different levels.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly some of what we talked about in the leverage points, right? So if we had to look at all of the different possibilities, which ones would provide the greatest amount of possible impact if we were to invest in working on that solution? That's kind of one of the key things that we, at the Circular Design Lab, we're challenged ourselves with trying to test and understand. When we worked on policy change, is similar to what many of you are mentioning. It's maybe people don't understand it, or they don't feel that's their role to engage in policy, or it's not socially, it's not a norm. It's not normal to be advocating in a very out loud way for government change, right? Or for the government to change things. It can be sensitive. So if we actually identify a lot of challenges, and in terms of solutions, so we know is sharing two examples, right? Graviki Labs, which has created, literally has created ink from air pollution. And then Etran, which is working on creating almost like, if you could think of it as like an Airbnb for electric bikes. So you're trying to make it more accessible and cheap and available for everyone to have electric bikes, which would not be polluting, right? The same way that a regular fossil fuel based or gasoline or petrol based motorcycle would. So any wild ideas coming up from you all? Just things that pop to mind, anything interesting?
So just building, Courtney, on the e-trend bike, what if it wasn't just business to consumer using the bikes, but actually government replaced every single wind bike and moto driver in Bangkok, for example, or across Thailand with one of these electric bikes, and there was a subsidy model in place? How can we scale the solutions that already exist as well?
Ooh, I love that. So subsidizing the transition away from, towards an electric future, electric vehicle future. Cool. Nok, I see your hands. How about you? What are you thinking?
I actually wanted to support Stephanie. A few years ago, the Thai government had an incentive for eco car, and people just went in and switched to eco car, and also like China, I don't see any motorbike there, only electric bikes in China. And I don't know how, I don't know what kind of regulation that they have, but for some reason, everyone is using electric bike in China.
So they've been able to commercialize it successfully. Yeah.
Interesting. And in Singapore, for example, the government applies a tax on non-electric so that it becomes increasingly, it becomes less affordable, so that it pushes the market towards buying electric more. That's something that could be also building on that, an interesting approach.
Yeah. So great, thanks. So I see we're on a systems change of the future of transport ideas there. So I think Steph, you're capturing that also on the board. Savan or Chao Sutin, Akash, any other ideas popping up for you?
For infrastructure, we should use fans instead of air conditioner in every houses, and also use electric bike, as already mentioned, electric bikes, or use public transport or trains, it can be reduced like air pollution.
Cool. Yeah, great. We have that captured too, right, Steph? And we have about 1 minute left. So maybe Akash, if you could offer our closing ID before we go back to the plenary.
I think Stephanie had mentioned this point about the tobacco industries, and I think Nok also mentioned something about cigarette use. But I think that is so that movement was so powerful, and I think it was led by Porter Novelli. It's a company, but Bill Novelli was at the forefront, and like their approach was very interesting and unique at that time, because I think they were also working with polluters when they didn't end up sticking to their end of the bargain. I don't know the exact details, but I just have read stuff about it. But I think that was such a powerful movement where like they very successfully created that narrative in society against tobacco, and like even the tobacco industries themselves were like, okay. So I think that's a very powerful point that I think Stephanie or Nok, I don't know who brought it up.
So working with the private sector as well on helping hospice the transition, actually, like holding the transition together, because I think most are pretty aware of what's going on, but their business model is kind of related to that, right? So we have to help understand that, meet them where they are as well, I guess. So unfortunately, we have to go back to the main room because we're gonna have to wrap up our session together. So big thanks to everyone. Let's see what the other group said, and see you on the other side. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. We're just gonna wait for the others to join. I think they have to get kicked out of their rooms before they come over. So that means some good conversations are happening, which is a great sign. But I know our group is here. We have another group as well. Maybe group 2 or group 1.
All right, welcome back, guys. So I do notice that some of you guys haven't finished selecting the ideas and are in the middle of conversation and got kicked out, but all the group pretty much have some kind of ideas that you are excited and you think that there's a potential for high impact and also high feasibility. So I'm gonna ask each group to share your top idea, probably 1 or 2 idea. It could be the group facilitator, it could be one of the participants as well. So can I start with the group 1?
David, you want to go? You want to do the honor?
Got to unmute the auto mute. Well, we had some interesting, ideas come up around, all of it, ideation stuff, which was great. And, realizing, that some of the higher impact, but really kind of unfeasible stuff was around policy and getting government change through setting standards or more some of the mindset-based stuff, like getting, science-based analysis, getting rid of policy made by the populace, by populism, I should say, and you know, a lot of the higher impact stuff was pretty easily done, like, you know, simplifying the messages and publish the air quality, show some thing, you know, get the message out, so to speak, and that was you know, where the low hanging fruit would be, so to speak, the higher impact, easier stuff.
Thank you. So I do notice we have like very few minutes left. So please keep your sharing short for the next group. Maybe just top idea, just one. And if you guys can stay, please stay until the end, because Kun Veena still have some sharing and the call to action to share. So, so the group number 2.
Okay, so it's actually me. So I'll share really quickly.
Okay.
We didn't have a chance to actually put our ideas down on the impact feasibility frame. But if you can move it slightly, Prawaka, to the left. But I think one of the top ideas that we actually had were some of the simple ones, which one of the participants came up with, which you didn't even think about, was actually, you know, our air purifying machines that we have at home. Why don't we make it transparent? So we actually physically see when the HEPA filters turn black. Because when we see how quickly that turns black, we realize impact on our lungs, right? Which that's a great thing. The other ideas is about actually using advertising for good. So putting up billboards that actually show that changes color based on the air quality, and actually trying to shift the mindset, because right now the concept of using cars is something that's very much linked with wealth and with status, but trying to make the fact that, you know, using public transportation and walking and cycling to be something that's cool. We also talked about the use of science monitoring, citizen science monitoring, to help with information flow. And then most of our discussion really centered around more about using ways to try to make the city much more friendly, to make it more pedestrian friendly, biker, cyclist friendly, ideas about closing up the center of the city. So more around those sorts of issues. And I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. The third group.
Okay, unmute. Could John or could Paulina, would you like to share the idea? Or...
Yeah, sure. So we were talking much about the ways we could change mobility within the city, and we basically worked based on our work and our thoughts on the idea of the new electric scooters. And so we said that maybe having a system that allows you to basically borrow an electric scooter within the city and then just place it, like use it and then put it somewhere else, would actually not only free up space within the city, so free up roads from cars, but it would also allow people to move around more sustainably, because the scooters would be electric and would therefore create less emissions.
Thank you so much. So the last group number 4.
Sure, I can share for group number 4. So we had a really, really rich discussion. We first started with talking about looking at some of the existing solutions. So the e-tran example for, you know, how might we mobilize private and public sector to, you know, get the uptake of this beyond individual consumers, but actually get government to, for example, replace all of the current bikes on the road and actually like scaling it through that, or even providing policy shifts so that it's less affordable to get a non-electric vehicle. So we're looking at examples around the world where that's worked, but really working with private sector to help this transition to more clean energy use. We looked at examples around tobacco, what has shifted really the use of tobacco, because a lot of this, when we got closer down the iceberg, a lot of it was really behavioral, our perception of the impact and our behaviors in relation to the impact that's being created, and what might we learn from the tobacco shift, how that really changed culturally as well as through different systems to create a similar approach here. We talked about different ideas around making sure that policies are actually enforced really often they aren't, or haven't taken into account alternative, for example. And then finally, we thought, well, could we get Elon Musk on our side on this as well, especially if we get the private sector on board with helping transition? He's done some crazy stuff in helping cities and countries move forward. So that was our big, wild, hairy idea at the end.
Yay! Thank you so much for sharing all your ideas. I find the idea very innovative, creative, and also you actually tackle the problem at all the layers, you know, from mental model, policy change, cultural change to system change. So and I think in the group we can actually see how you transition from diverging thinking, in which you use kind of open-minded mindset to generate many ideas, and then you move towards the idea selection, and you start to converge and judge, you know, which one is actually feasible, which one is actually impactful. So I'm gonna pass this, to Kun Veena to close this with the call to action and share some of the work of the Thai Clean Air Network. Okay, so may I invite Kun Veena to do a final sharing?
Sure. Is the slides coming up, Ajahn Prawal ka? Okay, it's wonderful, great, thank you. Just going to say apologies to everybody. I know we've had a lot of rich discussion and we're running a touch over time, but really appreciate everybody staying back to conclude on this. So let me walk you through the Right to Clean Air campaign that we've been doing together with CDL. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is the Right to Clean Air website that we created together. Next slide, please. And this is one of the events that was held at the BACC, where we had people actually write down on Post-its about, you know, their concept, their ideas about a clean air future. And we had all sorts of different events. We had artists coming, we had children's art exhibition and all sorts of things. And that was when we jump-started the actual petition for the Clean Air Bill. Next page, please. We've also got different things. We did a HEPA. We had a session where we had a DIY, creating a DIY air purification system for that's you know, really cost effective. And we've also worked with different students as well. So who is the Thailand Clean Air Network? We are basically an active citizen group that came together to try to find solutions to this clean air problem. We literally are volunteers. Our group is very small. It's only not more than 7 or 8 of us. So what we believe is that we need a solution that's holistic, that's comprehensive, holistic, and long-term focus. All of us come from very unique, different backgrounds. And actually we're not only cross-discipline, we're also cross-organization as well. And we truly believe that the solution needs to come from a bottom-up approach. So there needs to be a policy type solution that is a top-down approach, but it needs to be married with a bottom-up approach as well. Next slide, please. This is how we're moving. So we are, we started forming in 2019, and we've followed the EU's consultative process in terms of pushing through legislation. So we've developed this color-coded paper. The first step is we developed the Clean Air White Paper in 2019, and that pretty much lays out sort of the bigger picture background about the air pollution situation in Thailand. Last year, we issued the Clean Air Blue Paper, which is a 200+ page document that talks about the impact of air pollution. And currently we're in the process of developing the final paper, which is the green paper. And this is going to be talking about the solutions for air pollution by sector. And at the end, it's going to be a multi-sectorial solution. And ultimately, the end goal is the passage of a clean air bill. So in August of last year, we actually submitted the draft of the clean air bill. Next slide, please. And it was submitted to the chairman of the parliament, Kun Chuan Lee Pai. And we got approval for it to be circulated for public endorsement through. In Thailand, there is a process in which if you get 10,000 signatures, you can actually push for legislation to be, draft legislation to be considered in parliament. So what are the 5 key aspects of this Clean Air Act that would actually focus on the collective health of the public? First thing is that it will improve on effectiveness in terms of law enforcement. It will bring together co-management and decentralize the current process in terms of dealing with air pollution. So in fact, how does co-management work? Well, actually qualified civil society members, people who based on their skill set will actually be sitting at the level of policy making, regulation, and actual operations in terms of on the ground dealing with air pollution. It focuses on protecting our rights to breathe clean air. It marries both health and environment. So at the very high level, you're going to have the Ministry of Public Health and the Minister of Natural Resources and Environment co-chairing the highest body, with the Prime Minister sitting at the very top. And then the 5th thing is it actually prioritizes our right to know and right to information as well. Next slide, please. This is actually, I just copied the famous NEMI everybody saw during the situation that happened at the Suez Canal earlier on this year, right? So the point is that people talk about, in Thailand, we always say this a lot, and it's like, oh yeah, whatever problems there is, what's the solution has to start with me. And that's a wonderful and great thing. And whatever we can do within our realm of control is always a good thing. But ultimately, something so big and so complex like air pollution, it is a structural problem that we need to deal with. And that's why we've decided to tackle it from the part that's the most hardest, which is a structural problem that needs to be dealt with, because the rules of engagement or the actual legislation on this doesn't actually exist in dealing with clean air. Next slide, please. How does a social movement to ignite awareness happens? It happens in steps, right? So first you have to acknowledge the problem. When you acknowledge the problem, then you want to learn more about it. You want to understand the impact of it. So, and how it affects your life, really. That's when you start building a real awareness that, oh my gosh, this is really affecting me and those that I love, right? And then we start to demand, you want to protect your right. And ultimately, when we talk about the right to clean air, we're really talking about the right to life itself. And ultimately, the final step is you want to demand for legislative change. Next slide, please. So this is what we've been done. We've actually had a few sessions when we could, when COVID allowed us to, where we set up a few booths. So we've had different people, KOLs in Thailand and people from all walks is coming in and physically signing the actual petition. Until only end of last month, you had to physically sign this petition. But now there's been a change in the legislation on how to submit laws in Thailand. So you can actually submit your petition to us digitally online and send it to us by email now. Next slide, please. So that's why you're saying that on the slides, just to show you that at the human scale, we're always trying to think, what can I do? And this is something that we try to show people that you can do it. And it's as simple as, next slide, please. Going on to our website, which is called thailandcan.org. CAN stands for Clean Air Network. And we actually kind of like that because when you say Thailand Can, it actually enforces the feeling that you can actually make something happen, right? Hence the name Thailand Can. Right now, we are aiming for 11,000 signatures. There's a touch over 10,000, just in case some signatures are actually taken out because they don't fulfill the criteria. But right now we've gotten about 3,500 signatures. We're a bit higher than this right now. We need 11,000 signatures. It has to come from Thai citizens above 18 years of age, and the rest of the criteria, I think most people would be meeting them anyway. So long as you're eligible to vote in Thailand, you're eligible to support a petition for the draft Clean Air Bill. And please join our website. This is our QR code. Literally, it is just downloading a form, filling it up, and emailing it to us. And I'll turn the back to Kun Prawal.
Courtney, do you want to give us final closing?
Actually, I would just say thank you for joining, and certainly if you're interested in continuing to engage at a pretty, I guess you could say, pragmatic and systematic level, then collaborating just like Circular Design Lab did with the Thailand Clean Air Network is the #1 way to do it with the Thailand context anyways. But nope, that's it from my side. And just want to say thanks for all of the support facilitators, and of course, everyone that joined along the way. Really appreciate it. We have a systems design part B on Saturday. It's our final workshop of the Bangkok Design Week, but that's going to happen June 19th. It's 2 hours, part B. Part A is already recorded and up on the website if that's of interest. Make sure you get registered for that. But if you found yourself enjoying the tools, there's so many more, as Prawal was mentioning. And then also, we're just scratching the surface, right? We wanted to just, as Kin mentioned, we're opening the appetite. It's impossible to digest all of the complexity in a 90-minute sprint, but it was important to just start opening the gates and see how others may want to contribute. So Prawal, over to you. That's it from me.
Hey, Courtney, if I could jump in really quick. You said it's the last Bangkok Design Week event. It's the last one for this week.
I meant
2 more in July.
workshop. Sorry, I was saying workshop.
Oh, workshop,
Chris.
yeah.
Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah.
This is the last workshop.
Make sure people know there's more stuff coming.
Correct.
Yep. Yeah, got it.
Right. So I guess I'm just saying, just thank you for all the insights and energy and the help from the facilitators. So I hope to see you guys in the Systemic Design Part B and also upcoming seminars and events. Do we want to take a group photo? Courtney, do you want to do that?
I see so many cameras off on this one. I would say that most people probably maybe next time, since the cameras haven't been flashing. Cheers. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. Thank you.
Bye.